Hey everyone, welcome to our much anticipated webinar where we'll be discussing the future of marketing and what place cookies hold in it. Along with it, we'll also discuss the importance of first-party data. I am your host, Devender, a marketing professional with over 11 years of experience and currently working as a marketing manager at Grazitti. We all know that imagining marketing without data is like thinking of a novel without any words and a comic without any fictional characters. Can't imagine it, right? To shed light on this particular topic, I have with me Mr. Jon Robinson, a seasoned marketing professional with over 25 plus years in the industry. He's currently working as head of sales, Salesforce at TestSigma. And along with him, I have Ms. Helen Yu with over 25 plus years of experience in the marketing industry. She is the CEO of Tigon Advisory, host of CXO Spice, and is in the board of directors at CEC and Keenforce. Hi, folks. Hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
So let's start by understanding the journey that we have been on. What does cookie mean for marketing and advertising, Jon?
So let's go back a long time ago in the days of yesteryear where, Netscape was this cool new technology on the scene. And unfortunately, computers at the time just really weren't prepared for what it needed to do. And some really smart people over there figured out a way, well, hey, what if we write some of the information we're needing to do onto the computer itself, and then we can call it back up later when we need it. Hence the cookie was born. And that was a great tool. And unfortunately, people realize fortunately in some cases, right, where people realize the actual impacts of what that could mean and what benefits that could bring to the table for certain industries, marketing specifically. And, it started off as something that was meant to solve a technical problem and ended up being something that the original use case is so infrequently utilized these days. And now it's really just a mechanism tool for marketing and advertisers to track and manage data and capture information about individuals kind of during their online experience. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what cookies are and how they're used today.
Great explanation. So as the digital landscape evolved, privacy and data protection concerns grew a lot. We have all seen the kind of revolt that has been happening in the past few years regarding the privacy and data protection that Google was not offering at that moment. Can you explain the role of regulations like GDPR and CCPA to protect user privacy, Helen?
Absolutely, Devender. So as Jon said, right, the cookie are the tiny data files that improve browsing by remembering our actions and preferences. When we talk about cookie compliance, it is a mandate for websites to inform us about cookies, right? Basically, they have to obtain our explicit consent and to ensure data security. So when we talk about GDPR, it was actually effective since May 25th, 2018. It refers to General Data Protection Regulation. It is a European Union regulation on information privacy. It requires explicit user consent, access, correction, and deletion of personal data. What I like about it, it has 7 principles, right? The purpose, limitation, data minimization, accuracy, storage limitation, integrity and confidentiality, and accountability. CCPA is the California Consumer Privacy Act. Is a state statute intended to enhance privacy rights and consumer protection for residents of California. So it gives California residents a certain amount of control over personal data business collects about them. It only applies for profit business with over 25 million gross annual revenue. There's also a CPRA, right? That's referred to the California Privacy Rights Act of 2020. Known as Proposition 24, that one is more strict. It prevents business from sharing any personal information. And then it also requires business to limit business use of sensitive personal information, including precise geolocation, race, religion, generic data, private communication, or sexual orientation, or specified health information. So under CCPA, consumers actually may request information about personal identifier information called PII, as well as the categories of PII business collects about them. And then CPRA expands this right to include the data a business shares, and they also have to explain to you the time frame, right, when they collect information from you. There are many other global regulations there, other laws like include the EU's e-privacy directive, UK PECR, and Canada's PIPEDA, and Australia's Privacy Act. So depends on where you have the business, you have to be mindful about these regulations in different parts of the continent. And
definitely.
Yeah, you also talk about why it matters. Obviously, it matters because you have to understand the legal implication when you do business. So tools like this, there's some tools can help you ensure compliance, right? But it's very important for you to understand the local laws, implement clear consent mechanisms, and use compliance tools to safeguard user privacy.
Great. So as a marketer, we all know that we need data. At times, due to shortage of time, we choose to go with intrusive methods, be it cold calling, cold emails. But yes, as an end user of these strategies ourselves, we all understand the importance of privacy and the data protection. That is very necessary and is the need of the hour at this point of time. In response, Safari and Firefox already took that step by deprecating third-party cookies. Did this step put any sort of pressure on Google, John?
I think it depends on how you define pressure. I think one of the things that has become a trend or just a common conversation in recent years is user and data privacy, and how is our data being used online, and what does that mean for me, and what does that mean for you? And people started asking for more and better control over this. Safari and Firefox kind of took that first step and just baking it into the browser out of the gates, and adding the ability to explicitly have to ask for consent in order to be considered or allowed to work. And I think that had both the intended and potentially some unintended side effects. It definitely put some pressure on Google, but as we'll talk about in a minute, it might have kind of played into Google's hands a little bit, because the one thing that is kind of undisputed in all this is that they are still the browser king, between their desktop browsers and the Android systems that they have out there. The soon-to-be browser allowing in the EU, where they can be allowed in as a third-party browser option now without having to use SafariKit. There's a lot more actual installed devices, installed paths for Google to collect data from. And if you kind of step back and look at what Google's core business model is, it's data collection. And I think this put pressure on them to do things in such a way that would allow them to continue growing and consolidating that offering that they have without running afoul of a lot of the things that Helen just mentioned from a regulatory standpoint.
Definitely. And Google did announce that they will be phasing out the third-party cookies, and they started doing it for 1% of their users as well, Chrome users to be specific. But there were delays. Why do you think that happened, Helen?
Well, there are multiple reasons for the delay. As a glass water half full person, obviously I was disappointed to hear about the delay, but it would give a little bit more time, give marketers more time to adjust, right? Why, in terms of why the delay, based on what I've read, the Google faced scrutiny from the UK's Competition and Markets Authority. It's called CMA, right, which is really concerned about the impact on competition and market power. Besides, and many marketers are unprepared for the switch to alternatives, and the extra time is seen to be as a chance to figure things out. But you know what? People never get ready when, that doesn't happen, right? I'm not a big believer that if you give it another year, people will be ready. But there's cookies privacy sandbox designed to replace cookies with privacy-friendly alternatives has faced some criticism, as a matter of fact, and for being complex and potentially harming user experience. We're talking about 3 billion Chrome users. This is not a small feat, right? Critics argue that it might benefit Google more than other players, unfortunately. And as the industry adapts, this delay offers an opportunity to prepare, but I also is a time to really think about how do we make, have a privacy first mindset for not just Google, all these companies, and then how do we really improve or protect users while also without sacrificing user experience. Cookieless future is right around the corner. We need to really explore new strategies for digital advertising.
Definitely we do. And in a recent surprising move, Google did announce that they will not be deprecating the third-party cookies entirely, which was their promise from past year. Now they have all of a sudden given the similar, functionalities where people can go and check on their preference setter whether they want to share their data or not. Again, it's not the default setting, which should have been the case. So how do you think, John, that this will impact the future of marketing or the collection of data?
So I think this was a sneaky good decision on Google's part. And they pulled kind of a fast one on a lot of people in this regard, because as Helen mentioned, there's a lot of regulatory concerns about them pulling cookie support without giving an alternative option, given the fact that they have such a browser dominance. The only advantages to moving to Privacy Sandbox were really for Google themselves as a first party cookie provider and have access directly to the data themselves. Unlike Safari and Apple or Firefox rather, those guys aren't in the ad business, so to speak. Yes, Apple dabbles in it a little bit on the App Store side of things, but really they're not an ad company, right? Google is. That is a large percentage of their income. And for them to have all of the data that they're taking it away from the other advertising platforms and providers that are out there and only giving them a portion of that back. This was a sneaky good decision, because one of the things that we know about when Apple introduces, they're the other platform that has such a massive install base from a Safari standpoint. We know when they introduced their Apple app tracking technology, this allowed them to see, okay, the adoption rate or the opt-out rate from the tracking standpoint was, at least 50% in the lowest countries to upwards of 80% opt-out in the more stringent countries in the EU. That accomplishes the same thing Google was trying to accomplish by, dropping cookies entirely, but they get the goodwill gesture by making it seem like they came back on this thing and we're not going to get rid of cookies and we're not going to deprecate them. We're going to let the users decide. Well, they've already got the data that says the users are going to decide to not do that. So they've kind of done an end around both the legislation and the negative backlash that they were getting by simply saying, cool, we'll just give the users an option and let them choose. And they have a pretty good idea of what direction the users are going to choose.
Definitely. And this decision of Google is going to have far-reaching implications. Can you shed a little bit of light on what sort of potential impact is going to be there in future, John?
Yeah, I mean, this is...
Devender, you meant calling me or?
John.
No, I think this is kind of a follow-on from that last one. I think one of the things that we have seen as part of this is that we know what direction the users will lean when they're given the decision. And we know that Google was facing an enormous amount of pressure from regulators, industry advocate groups, and people that were really pushing back on this deprecation of cookies. And by giving users the choice, they already know which way, for the large majority of it, they're going to lean. That plays right into Google's hands. And so the more that they can get away with not having to deal with the regulatory side of things, which is kind of the biggest chief reason, Privacy Sandbox was only going to exist so that they could satisfy the regulatory aspects of it. And because they couldn't get over that hurdle, they needed another way to avoid that conversation. That was going to be the biggest sticking point for them, because, cool industry advocate, groups and all that, that they're going to scream and holler and they're going to make a fuss. But at the end of the day, they're still beholden to Google. The only people that could make Google do it is one of two people, Google or government regulators. And they opted to take the ball in themselves and do it themselves, which is smart. It was a good play. It's going to be really interesting how that plays out, though, in the long run, because it is not being done for the benefit of the user. And I think that should be very upfront and clear, just in how they've handled it thus far.
So although, John, you have very clearly mentioned regulators and the kind of role that they had when, the whole scenario and the whole conversation began, where people started pressurizing Google regarding the data privacy and data protection. Helen, I would like to understand from you as well that what does this progress that has happened in past few weeks means for regulators?
Well, it has significant implications for regulatory bodies. And the first one is regulatory scrutiny, right? We talked about CMA earlier. It will give them a little bit more time to examine the potential impact of Google's decision. And regulators are concerned that without third-party cookies, Google's dominance in online advertising could further solidify and potentially stifling competition and disadvantaging other advertisers. That's the first one. The second one is about data privacy concerns, right? Google's privacy sandbox, intended to replace cookies with privacy-focused tools, has stirred some debate. And we talked about earlier, people argue that while it aims to enhance user privacy, it might not be fully effective and could centralize power in Google's hands. This really raises questions about whether the sandbox will genuinely protect user data to simply shift the power dynamics in the ad industry, as John actually alluded earlier. Thirdly is the global regulation impact. Different jurisdictions have varying regulations on data privacy, and the delay may affect how global regulations are impacted as companies and regulations adapt to new privacy standards and tools. The extended timeline could influence how international laws like GDPR, CCPA interact with evolving technology and practices. The fact that they pulled out so late in the game, that's an interesting move from my perspective.
Yeah, although majority of our conversation is around Google and what Google did or what regulators did, but in the mix of things, there are end users and the advertisers which are still very uncertain how the future is going to look like. So what is the impact all these developments are going to have on end users and the advertisers, John?
So I think from the end user standpoint, there's not going to be much different between all cookies being deprecated and you having a user choice. I think the general outcome is going to be effectively the same. In the short term, you might not see much of a difference. In the long term, you might not see much of a difference. The time in between might be a little bit of you'll see search rankings change, and you'll see some SEO type stuff change in the middle. But over time, I think largely both directions are going to be pretty similar. From an advertiser standpoint, though, I think it's the same, but from a different perspective. I think the fact that the way Google has opted to move forward with this should be a clear indication that advertisers and marketing teams need to start looking at and thinking about how they're going to proceed in a world where cookies are not the best choice anymore, and come up with a new way to go about doing data collection and data tracking and things along those lines. Because for all intents and purposes, Google has proceeded with that decision because they put the power in the user's hands. And we know from the existing data sets that we have, the users are by and large going to opt out of it as much as they can. So given how much influence that Chrome has in the market, I would say you're going to be at a best case scenario down to 30% of your, data that you're actually going to have today. You'll still have tomorrow. And that's something that we just have to get used to that world now, that's now different.
That is interesting. So, Helen, you have been in the industry far longer than cookies have been. You have been marketing for past 25 plus years. And I would like to know from your experience, what strategy should businesses adopt?
Well, we talk about first-party data right now in the new era of AI. As a matter of fact, we can do so much, right, with AI, and there are quite a few. I would say 5 powerful capabilities I like to highlight. The first one is analyzing first-party data, right? AI can process vast amount of first-party data collected directly from users through interaction with website or app. By applying the machine learning algorithm, it can identify patterns and trends within the data, such as our preferences, our behavior and purchasing habit, right? And these analysis helps business understand their customers better and tailor their marketing strategies accordingly. And then the second one is about pattern recognition. If you think about it, AI excel in recognizing complex patterns in data. It might be too intricate for traditional methods, but for instance, it can detect the subtle correlation between user actions and outcome, enabling more accurate segmentation targeting. So this means business can create highly personalized experience for users based on specific behaviors and interests without relying on third-party cookies. And then thirdly is about developing predictive models, right? If you think about AI-driven predictive model, use historical data to forecast future and trends, right? For example, I can generate a sales forecast and then have AI tell me what are the top 3 revenue trends, and then identify the key drivers for revenue generation. And it can also help me highlight where I had the revenue weakness in which part of the world, and then tells me why, right? So the fourth one is replacing cookie-based targeting. As third-party cookies become obsolete, hopefully soon, AI offers the robust alternative for targeting. If you think about it, by leveraging first-party data, AI can create sophisticated user profiles and deliver targeted advertising based on real-time insights. For example, AI can analyze some of the past interactions to predict future needs, right? If you're going online to look for a camera, for example, but you did not make that purchase, I'm sure, AI can come back to you with some recommendations, knowing that you may look for a model at lower cost or look for a model that's different than what you looked previously. And lastly is enhancing user privacy. Unlike cookies, which track users across sites, AI uses aggregated and anonymized data to make predictions and deliver more targeted content. This approach helps maintain user privacy while still providing relevant and personalized experiences. Obviously, there are also some downside of AI, and I'm not here to say that's the solution. So you have to make sure you use that. You have to make sure you have AI ready infrastructure. You have to make sure you have the data available. You have to make sure that's the right use case for your business. So you wouldn't just bluntly implement AI, but I think that's one of the alternatives can help you to cope with the cookieless world.
Yeah. So as majority of our audience that has joined us today are digital marketers. So Google providing this opt-in option and third-party cookies, will that have any impact on organic rankings and paid ads, John?
I think the answer to that is yes, because in the short term, you probably won't see much of an impact until this decision starts to make its way out into the wild, so to speak, and people start opting out and making those decisions. Because you got to remember, a lot of those are going to be done at the organization level. So those decisions are just going to take time to filter out and get into the actual marketplace. But I think once that happens, as we talked about, you're going to lose a large swath of the data that you used to have. And so a lot of the advertising campaigns and targeted ads and how you were targeting your users or your audience, so to speak, that's going to change. You're no longer going to have access to that data. You're not going to have the ability to do retargeting in the same way that you've historically been able to do that, because you no longer have that data. You no longer have the ability to follow that user as they move around the web. And I think that's important to start thinking about that now. And what are the things that you're doing from an advertising and SEO standpoint that will allow you to still provide the same level of service or get the same level of ROI from your ad campaigns, because you will see a lower performance when this happens, right? Because you're going to be cutting out potentially 60-70% of the potential audience from what you're doing, because you just don't have that data anymore. Now, if your business can successfully work on that 30-40% audience, great. Maybe you don't have to change anything. But if your data and your market is going to be reliant on the entire swath of the Google landscape, then I think it changes the nature of how you have to look at the campaigns you're doing, whether that's organic or paid.
Definitely, it is going to have different implications for B2B, B2C industries as well. So, and that is beyond the scope of prediction at the moment, that what is going to happen for which part of the industry. Helen, you already mentioned about the role of AI that can help marketers survive through this next phase of cookieless future, or the importance of first-party data. So we all know that AI has already emerged as a critical tool in navigating the cookieless landscape. Can you throw some additional light on this?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, AI can really help enhance the user privacy, right? And because it tracks, unlike cookies, which tracks user cross-site, AI actually uses aggregated data, anonymized data. Is very important. And then they can make the prediction without collecting the information at a personal level. And to me, this really helps maintain the user privacy while still providing a relevant and personalized experience. And I think that I talked about 4 other things earlier, right? AI's capability to analyze first-party data, and then pattern recognition, developing predictive models, and replace cookie-based targeting. But what it does require us to know, right? You got to have AI-ready infrastructure, AI-ready security, and you have to have people with the capability to understand how AI works. AI is not a solution for everything, but when it comes to personalized advertising, it can certainly play a really active role, especially in the cookieless future. This actually presents an opportunity for business to build better trust with your consumers.
Definitely. So from our audience, Nima Bagheri has written that in terms of cybersecurity, third-party cookies don't offer any benefits to end users. They only serve big companies to track users across multiple platforms. If regulators are concerned about user privacy, they need to stop giant companies from acquiring small companies and destroying them. Additionally, if people are worried about Google's power, they should support small businesses and services. How much do you agree to this statement? This is an open question for both of you.
I will throw this out there because I was going to make this comment earlier. I think the regulators in the U.S. have already kind of spoken about what they feel about Google in general with the antitrust around their search business, right? And they're getting hit pretty hard there. I think she's spot on with the assessment of the landscape. The one problem here, and this is where I mentioned this earlier, Google has two core businesses besides owning Chrome, right? They have a unique ability to capture data that nobody else is going to get access to. And that gives them a massive, massive advantage over big businesses, little business, doesn't matter, right? Whether you're using cookies, you're not using cookies. At the end of the day, because Google has created the dominant browser platform on the market, which I'm very curious to see now that one anti-competitive deal has come down, will they start looking at some of these other areas that Google is the dominant player in and really force them to split their business up in such a way that they can't do this anymore? I think that's a realistic next step for them, but it absolutely gives them an advantage today that nobody else can get. And that's something that I think the regulators are paying attention to, as, like I said, evidenced by their recent antitrust case.
Helen, your thoughts?
I definitely have some. I think the change is has bigger impact for smaller business than larger business, honestly, because having worked for both, right? There's smaller business heavily relying on third-party cookies for ad targeting today can lead to higher customer acquisition cost and reduced revenue if you think about this change. And then they also have limited budget for alternate tracking solutions or first-party data strategy. If they want to implement AI, they have to think about how much investment they have to get in, right? Same with platform dependency, greater reliance on ad platform and use third-party cookies and making adoption more challenging for smaller business. In terms of larger, like a company like Google, and then I kind of echo what John said, there's dominance in their business, right? From data infrastructure, investment, and data sources perspective. Overall, small business just face greater challenges due to limited resources when larger business have more capacity to adapt and innovate. So, we should really put our stick on the ground to call for privacy first strategy. And then I think at certain point, we need to build a stronger ecosystem with shared capability. And then for larger organization, become a mandate for them to help smaller business, right, to overcome such challenge. It's not just about, hey, I'm here by myself. This is what I can do. What about the rest of the world? We're not building anything for only top 10% of the company.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is one of the areas where AI can certainly help too, because to Helen's point from earlier, it's anonymized. It gives people the data without necessarily making it proprietary. And I think that is an interesting use case to see how that plays out and how much of that makes its way back into the marketplace.
Definitely. So the old saying that ethical way of doing things will always make majority prosper is still the key, to be honest. I'm just trying to summarize what you guys said. Besides that, yes, it is definitely possible, or it is definitely obvious, to be honest, that a smaller business, when it comes to, experimenting with the budget or having the availability of that sort of budget, will always be the concern, because a bigger competitor can always put in some extra dollars, put in some extra efforts through their resources, and can overcome these sort of challenges. When it comes to Google, even if, let's say, third-party cookies are gone, a competitor with with vast amount of budget will always overperform you guys, smaller players, to be honest. That is going to be the key. So we definitely need some sort of governance in terms of having a fair playing field for everyone. Moving on to the next question. This is from an anonymous attendee. So what are the top 3 priorities for marketers to focus on in the next 6 to 12 months to stay ahead of the curve and promote a privacy-centric future?
Helen, I'll let you take it first if you want.
Yeah, I would just give it 3P, right? They need to prepare, plan, and prioritize. So first, how do you prepare first-party data strategy? You got to invest in building the robust first-party data collection method to better understand and engage customers while minimizing reliance on third-party data, right? How do you plan? You have a plan to understand privacy compliance requirement, regulation, ensure compliance with evolving data privacy regulations by adopting transparent data practices, updating policies to align with legal requirements. You also have to plan to have the resources, right? I talk about AI-ready infrastructure, AI security ready, make sure you have the team, process, infrastructure, and people to get ready. Thirdly, how do you prioritize, right? Consumer trust and transparency, we talk about, has to be top priority. No matter what you do, profitability needs to be put aside, right? Focus on enhancing customer trust by clearly communicating data usage practices and implementing strong data protection measures. Because that's where, if you play the long game, you can really prevail as a business.
Yeah, I would echo everything that Helen just said. I mean, I think really starting to put together a plan for first-party data so you can start capturing this information and utilize it on your own without relying on somebody else, I think is going to be huge. Starting to look at some of the other technologies that are out there that are moving beyond using cookies. Yeah, they're still here. They're still around. People didn't get rid of them. But the reality is the world is changing and that ball is set in motion. It's just a matter of time.
Okay. So even after third-party cookies remain for Google users as a default setting at the moment, although they have the option to not choose it or to share their data, should businesses still revise their cookie consent or just rely on what Google has already provided?
Jon, I'll have you answer that one.
I'll go back to what I said earlier. I think in this whole game, if I were going to trust somebody, it would not be Google. Just because their interests are just not going to align with users or their competitors, so to speak, in this space. And so just keep that in the back of your mind.
Great. So how can businesses balance the need for personalization with the need to protect user privacy? I'll reiterate my question again. So how can businesses balance the need for personalization with the need to protect user privacy? So should they keep user privacy at the center of all that they are doing, or should think about potential growth or margins? What should be the
I know
goal?
Helen's answer on this. I'll throw you mine just really quick and then let Helen go in on it. I think, yes, the answer is they should absolutely keep user privacy at the forefront. But as we all know, that's not reality. So I'll let Helen dig into that a little bit more because I know she's got lots of thoughts on this one.
As a business, you got to play the long game. I mentioned this earlier. If you only focus on generating profitability for your company, people can tell, right? You're not going to survive in the new era in the longer run. Maybe you're going to make a few more $millions more initially, but eventually people will have other options or other companies they can work with. And so focus on building the trust, not only with your customers, with your employees, right? You think about that, that will lead to profitability. And profitability will be taken care of it by itself, in my opinion. That has always been my principle doing business. And then the company that I work with and work for, otherwise, why are we even having technologies, right? It defeats the purpose. It doesn't serve, do good. It doesn't do good for humanity, for us. To me, that's a no-brainer, right? Yes, you need to balance But what comes first? Consumer trust and transparency. And then when we do this, especially in a new era, an era of AI, right? When people know you're sincere, look, we all make mistakes from time to time, but they understand that was not intended. And then you course correct and you do it better. Along the way, people will be there with you along the journey. We'll do this together, right? And then I don't think anyone knows how to do this from the get-go, but you create an ecosystem, you do the learn as you go and do this together. Eventually, we're going to get to a more balanced place. It's going to be a win-win for all if we do this responsibly. Yeah.
Great. So is it possible to build trust with customers and encourage them to share their data with businesses? Is that something that you think is feasible?
Do I think it's feasible? Yes. I think in order for that to be a reality, though, we have to start respecting that data and the information that they give us and the constraints that they ask us to follow. We have historically, as a collective industry, been not really great with protecting that data, either from reselling it, putting poor security protocols in place and letting it get hacked and get out into the wild, or just blatantly misusing it. I think all of those factors have created this sense of distrust from our users that there's a reason why the opt-out rate is upwards of 80%, because they know what happens when they give their data. It is no longer constrained to the place they gave it to, but anybody that they have relationships with and anybody that, they're those people then and it just gets out into the wild. And I think before it's going to get to a place where they're going to willingly give it to us on face value, we have to start respecting that request, and then what they give us, respecting the boundaries that they place on us. If we treat each other the way we as individuals ourselves would want to be treated, I mean, how many marketers and advertisers share their personal data because they know how it's going to be used? I bet you the number's quite small in comparison to the general population because they know the realities of how it's going to be used. And I think until we get to the place where we're willing to share our own data and put it in the system, I think we're asking a lot for the users to do it, which is why other approaches that don't require personal data is going to be so much more important over the next 5 to 10 years.
Great. So next question is more into your arena, Helen. So are there any potential legal challenges that regulators might face with Google's new approach to cookies? Because they were very advocate and very vocal about how Google is misusing the data. Now they are a little bit lenient towards what Google is doing. Do you think there will be any implications towards the regulators as well?
Absolutely, right. And there are always implications when there's a change of directions. I think the regulators I mentioned earlier, there are quite a few, right? In CMA, we talked about earlier, it would give them a little bit more time to assess the situation and figuring out if the implementation of that. Then there's a global regulation impact. If you think about it, different jurisdictions have varying regulation on data privacy. So in this delay may affect how they are going to implement or adapt to the new privacy standard and tools. And then the extended timeline could influence how international laws like GDPR, CCPA interact with evolving technologies and practices. There's also data privacy, talk about the concern earlier. Even though they have a alternative like Sandbox, the users are not educated enough about how to use it, right? Look, when I get online, there are a lot of tiny, small print. I may not pay attention. So when you click something, you by default accepting whatever the terms are there, and how do we even know, right? To me, it needs to be made more obvious, and then these regulators need to step in to mandate that rather than just bury those small print, bury that into a small print without us knowing, right? I mean, for some of you probably heard an insurance company, they collect our driving data without our consent. Some of them, right, major automakers, and just give our information. Think you speeding without being caught. When you speed, your information is already sent because the car, right, tracking your speed, it already is being sent to an insurance company. Next time, your insurance premium might have gone up as a result of your being even you're not being caught by police, but you're being caught by your automaker and being caught and the information being shared with your insurance company. So that to me is unacceptable, right? Think about it. Unless I'm being told, right, you need to drive and here's what we do. So there are a lot of situations like this, personally or professionally, and we need to make sure we build that trust, sincere trust between us and our consumers, so that we can, really have at least the visibility into what the information being collected. I hope the regulators will really step in and take a harder look at the situation and help assess and then provide more guidance.
Definitely. So one of the most important aspects of a campaign is its performance. With the help of Google Analytics and other analytics tools that were available, which were actually tracking the cookie and giving us the data that how many users are coming through a particular campaign. If, let's say, according to our prediction, 70% of the users or 80% of the users are going to opt out of giving their data, how do you think marketers can stay on top of their game and still be able to analyze the performance of their campaign with great precision?
So I think this is one of the things where this is the whole reason GA4 was implemented and kind of force rolled out, because Google saw the writing on the wall with regards to this. And so they added the capability to start tracking more data, more customer provided data, customer being first party data, and have the ability to be much more intentional about that. I think in order for it to be effective, as we talked about earlier, just really understanding your first party data that you're collecting, having a good strategy around collecting that data, what you're collecting it for, how you're going to be utilizing it, and really don't do a lot of blind fire and forget type of campaigns, but be very intentional about your campaigns and make sure you set the tracking up accordingly across the entire spectrum of that campaign, because Google's not going to be able to tie those disparate threads together quite as easily, because in some cases the data just won't be there anymore.
Sure. So are there any particular technologies or trends that you foresee having a significant impact on data-driven marketing in the next couple of years?
I mean, Helen nailed it with AI.
AI definitely. There are some tools, really cool tools, right? And coming out and was the birth of generative AI. I actually tested OG.ai recently. Not here to endorse any tools, but then it does track the behavioral data at a macro level. It's really cool, right? To figure out and think about it, if you can enhance user experience without collecting the information, without collecting their private information, and taking that anonymized data, and in the real time, right? With the real time data insights, and then help you strategize your campaign strategy and everything. That's a dream to me. So AI definitely is going to play a significant role, in my opinion. But as I said, it's not an RX for everything. You have to make sure you have AI-ready data, AI-ready security, and then AI-ready team.
Definitely. We at Grazitti ourselves are also working on few applications of AI, but keeping in mind that data privacy is at the heart of it. Whenever we launch them, whenever we make them, this is one thing that we also have been taking care of. So as we approach the end of this webinar, can you guys please help us with some key pointers, or please help us summarize the most important takeaways for our audiences?
First party data, figure it out. Like, if you don't have a strategy for it, figure it out, because it's going to be, in the short term, the most important thing that you can do. It's not something that is going to be easily put together, especially if you don't have an existing plan for it. So really sit down and think about what data are you using from a third party standpoint that you can only get through Google at the moment. And, you know, understand if that data goes away and you no longer have access to that data, what is your fallback? What is your next step going to look like? Are there things that you can bridge that gap with first party data? Do you need an AI solution or some other thing that we don't know what it is yet? You really need to sit down and understand what that looks like, because yes, the next 6 to 9 months, nothing may change, but the tables have been set now and it will be coming. You're going to have to just accept that. Yes, they've been talking about it for a while, but I don't think anybody's really done anything with it, because everybody's kind of seen the writing on the wall that the regulators weren't going to let them do it. And so they're like, yeah, yes, we could make a change now, but does it matter? I think that time is now, because I think the way Google has set the table, it's kind of forcing everybody's hands.
Definitely. Your thoughts, Helen?
Yeah, I definitely echo what Jon said, right? I mentioned this as 3 Ps: prepare, plan, and prioritize. You know, how do you prepare as first-party data strategy, right? You got to invest in building robust data collection strategies through first-party data and better understand how to engage with customers while minimizing the reliance on third-party data. And how do you plan, right? There's privacy compliance. You got to plan, understand how do you ensure in compliance, depends on which part of the world you do business. And then also plan to have the team and infrastructure to be ready to not rely on third-party data. And then how do you prioritize, and consumer trust and transparency is what you should prioritize. And then definitely focus on enhancing that trust by, you know, clearly communicating data usage. How do you collect the data, what is being used for, and then implementing a strong data protection measures for, you know, to drive a longer term success.
Yeah, I will throw in there as a secondary aspect of that, whatever data you do collect and however you intend to use it responsibly and collect it responsibly.
Great. So thank you both for these valuable insights. As we wrap up, I'll summarize some of the key takeaways that has been shared during this webinar. So the cookieless future is already here, and the businesses need to adapt their strategies. Investing in first-party data collection, exploring alternative targeting methods, and leveraging AI are crucial for success in this new landscape. There are few things that marketers can do to stay on top of their game. One is testing and adopting alternative measurement solutions, because whatever is available and you are not getting the best out of it, it's high time that you need to test new and alternative measures. You need to start investing in first-party data collection and management. And as Jon correctly said, use that data very, very concisely and with responsibility. And you will need to follow the trajectory of privacy regulations and adopt accordingly, as the times are very dynamic and the market is evolving. Even market or the kind of regulations that are in place are evolving very quickly. So you need to stay on top of your game. At the end of it, customer experience or the user experience that you are providing to your users on your website or through your businesses is going to be the key and is going to make sure that your businesses survive through it. With that, I am Devender signing off. Thank you, everyone. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.